Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this 2-drawer console table. Now, in the last episode of My Doll's House Diary, I made a narrower one of these. This is constructed in exactly the same way, so below you'll find the cutting list for this 2-drawer console table and for the single drawer console table. Okay, so let's get started. So as I said there in the introduction, this is the wider version of the console table that I made for my top landing area. So all of the pieces that go across the table, which will affect the width, are going to be wider. And on this one, I've just made the side pieces slightly wider as well, so the unit will be deeper. The one I made to go in my top landing was only 30mm deep because I wanted it to stand beside that door opening and didn't want it to overlap too much, if you remember. But this one I've gone back to, which would be a more standard size of 38mm across, which would be 1.5 inches, so therefore 1.5 feet in real life, which would make more sense for a console table or a side table, occasional table, nightstand, something like that. But if you ever want to make a sort of simple table like this, either wider or narrower, then it's these central pieces, how I've laid them out here, that you would adjust, and then you could leave your sides at the 38mm. So keep those the same, and then everything else that goes across, either widen them or make them even narrower. But I'm going to give the cutting list for that landing table here as well, so that will be in the description box below. And like I say, they're constructing in exactly the same way, all of the same pieces. So if you want to sort of follow along with what I'm doing, but using those smaller measurements, then that will work perfectly well. Okay, so what I've got here are all of the pieces apart from those needed for the drawers. And as I'm sure you know by now, we always cut those once we've constructed the unit and we can actually measure those drawers and get an exact measurement. Okay, so I'll get some glue on my card and we'll get started. So we're going to begin by attaching the mouldings to the back and the side pieces. So I've put everything else to one side and I'll help you to identify those pieces as we go along, so you can put those into a little pile there. So we'll start with the side piece. So take your first moulding, and a little habit that I've got into is just to check both sides of the moulding and then glue down the side that has any little sort of nicks or dents in the wood, so that you've always got the nicest side of the wood facing forwards or outwards on your piece. Apply your glue and then just sit that along the top of the side piece. And I've got another cocktail stick there to remove any excess glue. I'll just pick that up and using my finger to make sure that that's nice and flush along the top there. Line it up at the sides as well. And then do the same with the bottom moulding. Again, just checking for the nicest side. And I've got my clamps handy here as well to clamp these pieces together whilst the glue dries. And it's important you do that because as the glue begins to dry, the wood will try to lift up from the piece that it's attached to, and then you'll end up with gapping. That. Just carefully go along with your spare cocktail stick, get rid of any glue seepage, and then you can use your clamps to attach those pieces. Like that. Piece can then be put to one side to dry, and you can continue with the back and other side. So whilst those pieces are drying, we're going to shape the front moulding, and that is your long narrow piece. So turn it lengthways like that and make a little pencil mark in the centre at each end. Join those up, so place the rule just below so that you're allowing for the thickness of your pencil nib. along like that. And then we're going to come in at each side by 6mm or 1/4 of an inch. So do a little pencil mark at each end at the top of the piece, and then do that at the bottom as well. Turn and join those up. And then we're going to make our curve in this bottom section here. Just hold that up like that. So this bottom bit, it will come from that little line there, go as high as this central line, and then come down to there like that. Now I'm going to do that freehand, but if you wanted to find a lid or something, or use your compass to do that, then you can do it that way to get more of an exact curve. I'm just going to sort of come in like that. And then try and copy that at the other side, like that. I'll pick that up and show you again. So I'm basically just curving in at each side like that. We'll cut those out and then we'll use sandpaper to even that up if we need to. So I'm going to start off using my scribe tool, and this is just like a pen with a nice sharp pointed end. And I'm just going to score that curve into the wood. So just use it like you would a pen, and I'm just doing some small little sweeps like that. And I just find that by doing it this way before you use your craft knife, you're more likely to stay on track rather than the knife sort of going off somewhere and cutting where you don't want it to. Go to the other end as well. So you can then bring in your craft knife, and it helps to have a nice new blade in there, nice and sharp. Be careful of your fingers when you're cutting freehand like this. Always make sure that they're at the right side of the blade. And then just cut through. Just do light sweeps at first, and then you can just use the tip of the knife to cut through the wood. Like that. Do the other end as well before you try and obviously pull that away. And then once you're through the curves, you can just bring in your craft rule, or your steel rule, sorry, and just cut along the straight line there as you normally would. So hold your rule nice and tightly and just cut along between the curves there until you can feel that the knife has gone through. You might still need to do a little bit of trimming just to release those corners, those curves. And there, it's free. So there's our piece, and we're now going to use some sandpaper to tidy that up. So I've got here a small piece of 500 grade sandpaper, and I'm really just going to use it to sand along those curves and sort of put it into a bit of a curve there, and that helps. And then the little corner at the side of the curve, I want to sort of round that off as well. Same at the other end. It doesn't take much, and this is where you can reshape if you've got one curve sort of deeper than the other or longer than the other. So you can sort of use your sandpaper to get them to match. Along your straight edge as well, around that corner there. I'm quite happy with that. And then what you can do is just put that flat down on your work surface and sand the surface to get rid of the pencil lines. So that's our shaped moulding. And we're now going to prepare the shelf piece. So if you lay together all of the sort of oblong pieces you've got left, like that, the largest piece cut from your 2.5 is the console table top, and then these two pieces, the smaller pieces, are the top and bottom of our sort of drawer section. So you can put those to one side and the thicker piece from the 2.5. So the piece you're left with is the shelf piece. And we're going to cut a 5mm square from each corner to allow for the leg pieces. So make a pencil mark at 5mm across the long top and bottom edges, and that's 13/64 of an inch, or the same width as your strip that you're using for your leg pieces. In my case that's 5mm. Then turn the piece and then do the same measurement going across the piece, and this time you can sort of join that up into a square like that, and that's the piece that we're going to cut out. And then our shelf will slot around the legs at the bottom. Like that. So we'll have a piece like that with a little square at each corner. We're now going to cut that out, and whenever you're cutting a section from a piece of wood, you always want to cut in the opposite direction to the grain first. So our grain runs along the long edge, so along there like that. So we're going to cut this way first. So just use the tip of your knife to cut out that first little square, like that. And try and stay on the pencil line or just inside it, otherwise you'll find that you've cut too big a square. And then you can go along the length of the grain, which is always much easier to cut out. So work your way around. And by doing that as well, by cutting on the line or just inside it, you can always remove a little bit by sanding if you need to. But if you cut sort of too large a square, then you'll have gapping around your leg, which doesn't look very nice. So pop that piece to one side for now, and by now your back and side pieces should be dry, so we can get those prepared prior to construction. And to prepare them, you really just want to sand along each side, just so that you haven't got any overhanging mouldings, otherwise the pieces won't fit together nicely. So just hold it upright against your sandpaper and sweep it along in one direction. Don't sort of rock the piece back and forth like that, or you tend to round off the corners. So do that on both sides of each piece. So we're now ready to begin construction, and we're going to begin by attaching the side pieces between the sets of legs. And I think my glue should still be quite wet underneath that top layer, so I'll use that up first. So begin by applying glue along each side, and I was just wiping any sanding dust off there, otherwise the glue won't work efficiently. So lay that piece back down on your work surface, and then bring in the first leg, and you want to attach the side so it's straight along the top of the leg, or flush along the top of the leg, like that. Give it a good press, and then turn and you can bring in that other leg. Make sure everything's pressed against your work surface as well. I'm just trying to keep my hands out of the way there. Press that one in as well, so you want that nice flush edge along the top there, because that's where our top piece will finally sit, and we want a nice flat surface. Give it a good firm press, and then you can hold on to that and bring in your clean cocktail stick and just remove any excess glue from along those joins. like that, and then just very carefully slide that along your work surface, and that piece can be left to dry, and then you can do the same with your remaining side piece. So before we start putting it all together, we've got a few pencil marks to make on a few of the pieces, and we're going to begin with the top and bottom pieces. So they're the unshaped 1.5mm 1/16 of an inch sheetwood pieces of the same size. So just pop everything else to one side for now. And we're going to make a pencil mark in the centre of each of these pieces, and this will be for placement of the drawer divide, which is there, which will sit in between those two. So just start with your top piece and make a little pencil mark in the centre along each long edge. Turn and join those pieces up. Place the rule just below the pencil marks so that you're allowing for the thickness of your pencil nib, even though that should be nice and sharp. And then as you join those up, just go on to the front and back edge of the piece, and that will really help when we're placing that central drawer divide. And then do the same with the remaining piece. The next pieces we're going to mark up are the leg sections, so turn them face down so that that moulded side is facing down like that, and turn them lengthways, and then we're just going to make a little pencil mark 5mm or 13/64 of an inch from that bottom edge, but do that 1/4 of an inch if that's an easier measurement to find. This is just how high up our shelf piece is going to be. So I'm doing mine 5mm, but 1/4 of an inch is 6mm, so if you want to go just a little bit higher to make it an easier measurement to find on your rule, then you can do it that way. Like that, and we'll use that when we come to place the shelf. So now we can actually start gluing the pieces together. So I've got my glue here on my piece of cereal packet card. I've got 2 cocktail sticks, one for applying the glue and one for removing the excess glue. And we're going to begin by attaching the back piece, which is the long moulded piece, to the back of one of the leg sections. And we're going to sit it just at the front of that back leg, so it's just joining on to that side piece there. And I'll attach it, and then I'll pick that up and show you what that looks like from the back. Apply glue along the side of your side piece. And then sit that into place, making sure it's right at the top of the leg and that it's sitting squarely down the edge of that side piece. I can come in a little bit with that. I'm going to hold on to it and remove the excess glue, and then you can just get a better look at the line or at the join there. It should be running straight up from that leg. Like that. Give it a good press. And if I just carefully pick that up and show you, see from the back there you've got that little overhanging bit of leg at the back, so this should be towards the front edge of that back leg. Pop that back down. Then you can take your top or bottom piece, and they're both the same, so it doesn't matter which. We're going to glue this into place on the inside edge, and so that the pencil line is sitting on the inside edge there. So apply glue to a short and a long edge so that that pencil line is on the inside. Like that. Then get your side piece into place first so that you've got a nice flush edge along the top of that side. I'm just going to push that back piece over a little bit without knocking it off. So just use your finger to make sure that you're right along the front of that front leg and that you've got a nice smooth join along there so that it's all square and flush for when we come to attach our top piece. And then see how the back piece is sort of leaning backwards, so what you can do is then pull that in to meet that top piece, and that will square it all off. Again, just use your finger or thumb there to make sure you've got a nice flush join. I'm just giving it all a good press together. I'm holding on to the leg section as I do that as well, otherwise you might find that it all sort of flicks apart. And just turn like that and have a look from the inside, make sure everything's staying where it should. Need to pop that back, just back a tiny little bit at the bottom there. And give it all a press. Get rid of the excess glue, even though it's on the inside, just because when we come to make our drawer or to insert the drawer, if there's any dried glue in there, it might prevent it from going in. Like that. I'm then going to lay that down onto its back like that. Just make sure everything's pressed flat against your work surface as well. And what I want to do now is just make a little pencil mark in the centre at the top of that back piece. So bring in your rule again. Lay the rule along that back piece and then make that little central pencil mark. And this will just help when we're placing the drawer divide. Like that. So bring in the drawer divide, and you'll notice in the cutting list that I've put to cut this so that the grain is in the direction of the shortest edge, whereas the normal rule is to cut pieces so the grain is in the direction of the longest edge. But in this instance, because it's that edge that's going to be facing forwards or to the front of the table, we want that to be the neatest edge. And the edge of wood that always runs in the direction of the grain is always the neatest edge. If you look along the edge that runs against the grain, it's always a little bit bobbly. And this piece is going to sit along that pencil line that we made and right along the centre of that line, like that. So apply glue to a long and a short edge. And then sit that into place, centrally over the line on the top piece, and use that little pencil mark there so you know it's sort of sitting centrally at the back there. Have a look from the front to make sure that you're not sort of angling it, you know, along the length. Just going to come over that way a tiny bit. And it's central with that little line I did on the back piece there. So I'm happy with the positioning of that. So give that a good press into place. Press and hold. Again, get rid of any excess glue on the inside edge there. A bit on that side. Like that. And we're now ready to attach the bottom piece. And again, we're going to make sure that the pencil line is on the inside edge and that the divide stays in the centre there, so we can double check with that little pencil line that runs onto the front of the bottom piece. So just begin by applying a line of glue to the bottom of the drawer divide. Like that, and then to a long and short edge of your bottom piece, and then sit that into place. Press it along the length of the central drawer divide and then press it to the back and side piece. Making sure you've got those nice straight edges. I just tipped it down there. So you just need to do a bit of pressing and holding until the glue begins to take. Have a quick look from the front and make sure that the divide is in the centre of your line. Mine needs coming over just a tiny little bit. And don't knock the other edge out when you're doing that. So now bring in the shaped moulding, and this is going to sit along the bottom edge of that bottom piece. and so that it's flush with the front of the leg. And I've got a little bit of an overhang on the bottom piece there, just a tiny, probably 1/2 millimetre if that. So I want to sit this so that it's actually flush with the front of the leg and not the front of that bottom piece, otherwise it will be too forwards. And then once the whole unit is dry, I can sand away that overhanging edge. So apply glue to the short and long edge. Like so. And then sit that into place. Using my finger there to make sure it's flush with the front of the leg. And then just sit in it so that it's straight along the edge of that bottom piece there. Look from the back as well, make sure it's sort of sitting upright as well. I'm just going to line up that other side and see if I've got an overhang that side as well. It might just be that I've cut the wood slightly off. So yeah, it is slightly overhanging that end as well, so I just need to leave that 1/2 millimetre overhang all the way along there. Like that, give that a good press into place. Okay, so then turn the table onto its side. I'm now going to bring in our shelf piece. And I've roughly had a quick go with these, and I think one of them was a little bit too tight, and it's actually this end. So the cutout bit there should actually slot between the first set of legs. So if it doesn't, you just need to do some trimming, but only cut off a little tiny bit and then try it again. So I think I just need to take a little bit more off of that corner there. So just snip a little bit out. Make sure it's straight. Like that. And then try again. And that goes in nicely now. And then you want to try the other end on the other set of legs, just to make sure that when we get there, that's going to slot in nicely as well. And again, I just need to take a tiny little bit off that end as well. But like I said earlier, it's always better to have them smaller than you need, rather than cutting too much away. Again, that goes in there nicely now. So that's this end. So I'm going to begin by just putting a bit of glue in each of those cutouts. And then slotting that in so it sits just above those pencil lines. Give that a good press, keeping it as upright as you can. And then again, you can come in and remove the excess glue just so that you can see those lines a bit better. And you should just be able to see them just below that shelf. And then you know you've got it straight. That one as well. Go up a little tiny bit that side. And then what we want to do now is attach the final side. So just sort of do a dry fit first to make sure that it's all sitting where it should. And that will sit there like that. And it's just, if it wasn't quite going into place, you may need to do a little bit of sanding if you've got either of these parts a little bit too long. And it's always best to check before you actually put the glue on and are sort of committed to gluing it into place. And I'm really happy with that fit. So I'm now going to apply the glue to all of these edges. And then we'll grab some masking tape and secure it into place. Don't forget to apply the glue along the edge of your moulding and then into your little cutouts as well. And if you wanted more of a rustic look for this piece, you can use a thicker piece of wood for this shelf, and you might want to score some grooves into it as well. I'm sure you've seen me do that before on other pieces. Quite easy to do using a screwdriver alongside your steel rule. So again, make sure that your top of the sort of leg section is lined up with the top of the table there. And I'm checking that it's flush along this front leg as well. And then have a look in there and make sure that the bottom is also sitting on the inside of the side piece. And then get hold of it like that and press it gently together, and then you can check that the shelf is in the right place. And I could already see that it's far too high on that leg there, so I'm bringing it down a bit there, and it needs to go up at the front. So I'm sort of manipulating it into place now because it's sort of trying to ping out. So get it into the right place, and then you might just need to press against both legs. So it needs to go down at the back there, like that. Have a peep in, make sure you're in the right place, front and back, and then just hold it all together. And then I'm going to lay that down and use a bit of tape now to secure it all together. So I just want to put a little bit of tape over there first. Just put that there like that, pop it on the inside. And then I'm going to lay it on its back like that and put some pieces right across the front, and that will really pull the whole thing together, keep it nice and square. So press it together as you do that, pull the tape nice and tightly. And I want to put a piece across where the shelf is held. Make sure you're not knocking that out of place as you do that. Have a quick peek at the pencil lines. So I'm now going to leave that to dry, and whilst that's drying we can prepare the top piece. And with the top I just want to bevel one long edge and both short edges. So with your sandpaper flat on your work surface, hold the piece at a 45-degree angle and sweep it towards you, keeping it at that angle. That's just starting to bevel off, but it's uneven, so you want to keep going until you've got a nice even bevel all the way along, like that. And what you can actually also do to help with making it even is go that way along your sandpaper. So still hold it at an angle and just sweep it along the bevel once you've created the bevel. So you'll need to do it that way around first, but once you've got the bevel there and you think it's a little bit uneven, you can just go that way along the sandpaper. And that will sort of sharpen it and also make it nice and even like that. And then do the same thing on the sides, like that. And then I like to take a piece of fine grade sandpaper and just tidy that up in my hand, and that will just get rid of any sort of little snags that you've got around the top edge. So just go along each bevel like that. And then, as I did with my smaller console table, I'm going to be applying walnut wood stain to this piece, or walnut wood dye. So I'm going to prepare it for the wood dye now, and that's another little job we can do whilst the glue is drying on our table. Because we only need to apply the wood dye around the outside edge of the underside of the top piece, you can make yourself a little masking tape handle. So just put a piece on the inside edge there, so this is the beveled side. Make a hoop like that, make it into a little handle. And then I just add a couple more pieces at each end, and then when you're holding it, that helps to sort of hold it in place. Just cut a couple of pieces like that. Put one at each end so that you're not covering the bevel, and you've still got a border around that edge. You can then apply your wood dye and then use that as a prop and leave the piece to dry. So I'm going to apply the wood dye now, and I'm using my walnut again. And whenever you're using wood dye, make sure you start with a really good shake. So I'm going to start by moving the table out of the way, just because wood dye tends to be rather splashy, however careful you're trying to be, and you don't want to get it onto your wood. So I'll pop that to one side. I've given that a good shake, and then when I'm just doing something small like this, I just dip my brush in. I don't know if I've got the top there on camera, let me come up a little bit. So I just dip the brush in, and I'm running out of this one actually, and then just pop it onto the side of the tin like that, and then apply the wood dye, and then I can just keep going back to the edge of the tin. If I was applying wood dye to a larger piece, then I would dispense a little bit into a pot, but when you are just using a tiny little amount, it's just an easier way of doing it. I've got it along the back edge and all around the underside there, and then you can apply it to your top edge. Just get a little bit more there. Like that. Make sure you've got a nice even coverage. And the good thing with wood dye or wood stain as opposed to varnish is that if you find you have any sort of little ridges, you can just sort of go over them. So just sort of mix them all up like that, and then go along straight again, brush along smooth. I used to find when I was using varnish that if you say you go along, you know, the edge of a side piece or something, by the time you've done the whole side and that piece has dried, you've then got that ridge there, and it's quite noticeable. So that's why I now prefer wood dye and use it for all of my sort of dark wood projects. Okay, so I've got a nice even coverage there. I'm just going to grab a piece of kitchen towel and just dab off the excess wood dye. Can't seem to get the camera in the right position today, and the leg of my tripod has gone a bit wonky as well. It's quite difficult to reposition now. I need to order myself a new one. And I'm just really lightly sort of dabbing that on there, which will get rid of that excess and leaves you that nice even coat. And then at the end of the project I'll apply some clear wax to this piece just to give it a nice sheen. Okay, so that can be left to dry. So once you've allowed enough time for the glue to dry, remove your tape, and this has been drying for a couple of hours now. I've been working on another project, and what I want to do now is sand this whole front area. So I've got my sandpaper here and I'm holding it face down and just applying pressure to the whole piece, and then I'm going to go round in small circular motions. And what that's doing is just ensuring that you've got a nice flush front to your unit, so there's no overhanging pieces, and it just really does make everything look so much squarer and finishes it off really nicely. So I've still got a little bit more to do because this bottom piece here is still overhanging a little bit, so I'll do a little bit more on there, but I am actually going to go around all sides, so it doesn't hurt even to do the side, and then if you've got any sort of overhanging shelf pieces, that will sort those out. You can do the back as well, like I say, both sides, and then I like to hold it onto the top like that as well and go around in small circular motions, and that way you know you've got a nice flat top as well for when we attach the top piece. So we're now ready to construct the drawers, and as you know by now I always advise cutting these pieces after you've constructed the main unit, and then you can measure the drawer openings and get an exact measurement for these pieces. So I always give the sizes in the cutting list, but that is to be used as a guide if everything goes according to plan. But if you sort of misplace any of these pieces or put the divide just off centre, then that's going to affect the size of the drawer openings. So it's always better to wait to this stage and then measure each drawer opening. So don't just measure one and then make both drawers in that size. You need to measure them both, and you always want the height, width and depth, and then just deduct 0.5 millimetre if that, so probably 1/4 millimetre from those measurements, and then cut your pieces to that size. Like I say, using the ones that I've given in the guide, in the cutting list as a guide. So we're now ready to glue the drawers together. So begin with the base piece and apply glue along each edge. Pop that back down and attach the sides, making sure that you've got flush edges along the front and back. And what I'm actually going to do is just get these roughly into place, and then I like to use strip wood to give them a good firm press against the base. So I've got a couple of spare pieces here. So press them against the side like that, good firm press. And it's better than using your fingers, because this way you're getting or applying even pressure all the way along those side pieces, and it also holds the side pieces upright as you do it, so you're sort of squaring it off as well. So give those a press, and then just give it a gentle nudge along your work surface, just so that it's not going to stick into place, and then you can move on to your second drawer if you have one. If you do sort of just have it so you've got one drawer, so you would just not use the drawer divide in this particular unit, then I would advise sort of doing a drawer knob at each end of the drawer, rather than having a big long drawer with just one drawer knob or drawer handle in the centre. So these pieces should now be dry enough that you can handle them without them falling apart. So apply glue along the front and back edges. Pop those back down, and then attach your front and back pieces, making sure that you're flush along the sides. Pull them in if you need to. Like that. Once you've got them into place, you can pick them up, give them a good press. You can use your strips again just to put the pressure along those front edges as well. And then that can be left to dry. Then you can move on to your second drawer. Once you've allowed enough time for the drawers to dry them into place and sand if necessary. But if you do need to sand, just do a little bit at a time, try them again, and then sand more if you need to. You don't want to sand too much and have too much gapping around the edge. So I'm happy with the fit of those, so now I'm going to drill the holes for the drawer knobs. For my drawers, I'm going to be using these little pre-turned drawer knobs, and these are 2.5mm in diameter, 3/32 of an inch. If you're going to be using a pull handle, then you can skip this stage and apply those once you've actually painted the drawers. But if you're using a little wooden drawer knob, then you can drill the holes now. And I've just started by making a little pencil mark in the centre of the drawer fronts. Now the little stem on these is a little bit wider than my biggest drill bit. So I think that's just under 2mm, and this is 1.6. But I'll just drill the holes and then show you a little trick just to make them a little bit bigger. So keep the drill as upright as you can. Excuse the squeaking, I know it's not a very nice sound. And then when I drill through, I always just like to jiggle that around a bit, and that makes the hole just a tiny little bit bigger. And then if you bring in your drawer knob, if it doesn't fit, bring in a clean cocktail stick, pop that into the hole and just twist it around. And that again will just make it a little bit wider, and then you should be able to pop that in like that. So I'll do the second one and then I'll glue those into place. So I'm just going to pop a tiny little bit of glue around that hole. Like that. Same on the other one. That will just mean they're attached nice and securely. Into place. Push it all the way in, make sure that it's flush with the front of the drawer. Nice and level there. And you can just use a clean cocktail stick to remove any excess glue. Like that. So the unit and the drawers are now ready for paint. So once again I've used the Rust-Oleum chalky finish paint, and I've done a couple of coats on there, and I gave it a gentle sand after the first coat. So this second coat is now drying. Once that's dry I'll sand again, and then we'll be ready to attach the top. So once the paint has completely dried, refit the drawers, and you might need to do a little bit of extra sanding, just because when you've added paint you're increasing the width of the drawers and reducing the width of the drawer openings if you do that line of paint on the inside edge, which I like to do just so that you can't see any natural wood. But I do only go in a little way and just do a little line around the opening there. Don't do all the way inside. And my left hand drawer is a little tight, but I like that rather than them being too loose and there being too much gapping around the outside edge. But again, if you do need to do a bit of sanding, just do a little bit at a time, try them again and do some more if you need to. But I'm going to put those to one side for now, and we're now ready to attach the unit top. So I've got a bit of glue here on my card. I'm just going to spread that over the top of the table. Make sure you get it right along the edges and on the top of the legs or into the corners. And then bring in the top part, and this is going to sit flush with the back of the table. So get that back bit lined up first, and that's flush with the back of the legs rather than the actual table back. Otherwise your legs will be overhanging. And then you want to make sure you've got an even overhang at each side. So I'm just carefully sliding that over. And the overhang should actually be the width of that bevel. So if you line it up so that bevel runs up nicely from the corner of that front leg, then you know you're in the right place there. So when you push against the sides rather than the underneath. Always push against the supported areas. Have a look all the way around, make sure you're happy. Then I'll just grab another cocktail stick and get rid of the glue, and then we can secure it into place. So pop that down, just checking it hasn't moved around while I've been moving the glue. And then I'm going to put a bit of tape straight over, and then I'll put clamps along the front edge. Put a piece straight across the middle like that. Pull it nice and tightly. I'm going to have a look around the back, and if that's lifting up, which it is, you can put a couple of pieces over there as well. Just to really hold it down nice and securely. If you pull up any wood dye or paint, you can always touch that back in at the end. And then the clamps along the front edge there. I always like to sort of fit on as many as I can. It's important to clamp along the edges, otherwise the wood will try to sort of lift upwards and you'll end up with gapping. Oops. That one in there. So that can now be left to dry. Okay, so we're almost done now. I just want to finish off the top with some clear wax, and for that I'm using this clear shoe polish. And you can apply this with a piece of kitchen towel or a soft cloth. I'm using a piece of kitchen towel here, and this is quite old and it lasts a long time, but it does tend to crumble after a few years. But it doesn't matter, it still works, still does the same job. So just pick a bit of that up and then apply it in small circular motions. And this just adds a really nice sheen to the wood. See there how already that's darkening up the wood dye and adding a really nice sheen. And there is the completed console table. So let's go and put this into place in the doll's house. And that is going to sit just there. So I built it to fit exactly in that gap. taken into consideration as well the door surround when I get around to doing all the fittings in there. I really like that there. I think that will look really nice with a mirror or a painting above. And then what I also might do is make a couple of storage baskets to go underneath. I think that would look really nice. But you can just dress the piece and perhaps have a really nice vase underneath. You could put some letters and things on top, so I'm really looking forward to dressing that piece. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, bye!